early in the morning, and I will take a minute to guide you very quickly through the platform, so as you know how it works in case it's your first time with Adobe Connect, and then I will give the floor to our speaker. So, as you have noticed, we will use the chat for any comments or questions and messages you might have. So we will not be able, unfortunately, to hear you. So any communication from your side is going to happen in writing. Oh, I can see there are some people who cannot hear me. Hold on. Okay, hopefully it will work for the team of 5 people soon. So as I have said, your microphones are going to be muted. We are going to have quite a few polls, so please pay attention to them. They will appear on your main screen where you can see the presentation slide right now. Make sure your speaker icon is green, then you can hear as well. It's on the black top bar, and also next to it you can see an icon of a man with a raised hand. You can use it to communicate your emotions or suggestions. You can click on it to see what options there are available. They are like agree, disagree, speak louder, speed up, and things like that. So please feel free to use them. Okay, let's see if it's... Okay, so I can see you now, can hear me. And this is great. I will ask the speaker to speak loud, so maybe that will be better. Okay, so and now I'm giving the floor to our presenter, to Marion Prats from Terre hommes headquarters. Give me a second to put her slides on. Here it is, and now Marion, the...
Okay, thank you very much. Hello everybody. Just a quick test again. Can you all hear me well? Okay, fantastic. Just let me know whenever you're losing me or anything that you need, just let me know in the chat. So to start with, I'm not an English speaker. I can speak quite fast sometimes, so please again let me know if I'm going a little bit too quick. So this is a roundtable more than a webinar actually. It's more thought as a discussion between all of us so we can exchange practices and ideas. And to present myself, I'll start saying I'm the child protection and emergency specialist in Terre hommes headquarters in Lausanne. I've been working here for the last year and a few months, so I'm pretty new in this organization. But previously I was working with UNICEF for years in Latin America and in several emergencies in Africa. So before presenting yourself as well, I'm gonna lead you through the plan of the day. So today we're gonna have two main parts to the roundtable. The first one is gonna be more conceptual. The objective is for me to present you what is PFA, what is not, so we can ensure we have a common understanding on the concept and on the way to practice and to provide psychological first aid to our beneficiaries. So we're going to see as well when we can provide it, where and to whom, and who is able as a worker to provide PFA. We're going to go through the PFA principles as well, and some limitation, because it's a methodology of work and it's obviously not perfect. And the last topic of the first part would be some communication tips, because communication in psychological first aid is really key. The second part of the day of the roundtable would be more aimed as the staff of Terrorism or its partners on the field that are currently implementing our project. So the objective here is to think a little bit deeper and further regarding PFA and how are we working with it, and if we are correctly managing the principles of PFA, and mostly to think about how do we use indicators on PFA, how do we report the work we do in PFA, how can we use PFA to give us as well inputs for reorienting the program or for decision making, for instance. The objective of the second part is really to try to harmonize what the teams are doing on the field with the beneficiaries we have. So first, I was curious actually to know a little bit who am I talking with. Actually, I kind of feel alone for now because I hear nobody. But I wanted to know a little bit more about you, so at least we can get to know each other. So I wanted to ask you to present yourself, and I hope you see on your screen a poll that I just opened, asking you to present yourself by stating your name. Well, actually, I see your name. Camille, Mina, Nina, Jazer, Mira. So I see some of them. And maybe stating your nationality, so I can know where you are, and also your job position, in which kind of job you're working, with whom, eventually. So if you can share this with me, that will help me to get to know you a little bit. Are you all seeing the poll? So you must have a box open in the middle of the presentation, and you can type directly your name, nationality, and job position. So I'll start. I'm Marion. I'm French, and I'm child protection. Oops, I wrote French bad actually. Oh, there is something. Yes, there are 5 people. Well, you can write 5 times, maybe. You can start with Jazer and then Mira, and do it piece by piece, maybe. So I've seen we have, or maybe we can do it like this. Oh, but I don't know, where are the results actually? Field associates. I think some results actually, okay. So we have a social worker, a field associate, 2 Serbian person, wonderful. Psychologists, knowledge manager, another psychologist, is project assistant for TDH or one of his partners. So while you're tipping your presentation, I'm gonna move to the next point. I wanted just to present quickly the project. I'm not sure everybody is completely familiar to it. TDH has been writing a project to respond to the actual refugee crisis situation in Eastern Europe. We first aimed to work from Budapest, but then due to the building of the walls, the refugees couldn't really come into the country anymore, so we changed and we chose to work in Serbia and Macedonia because we had partners there, and because these two countries were receiving quite an intense flow of refugees coming from mainly Greece and Turkey in destination to Europe, most of the time with the will to reach Germany. So the project has have several components, one of which, I'm not going to go through all, but one of which is around child protection. So we plan to set up some safe spaces, so to ensure children and their mothers or family and the younger babies as well have a correct space to spend a little bit of time, to can have some recreative activities, to rest a little bit, and to be able to share as well with other children during this migration route. In this space, we are also distributing some what we call NFIs, which are non-food items. That means different items not related to food. That can be warm clothes, some, I don't know, baby nappies, for instance, whatever the people can need when reaching the country and might not have. We are trying to help them by distributing some of these items. And within these child protection activities, we foreseen to have PFA's activity, that is psychological first aid. So that's why we are here now. What is interesting to understand is that both countries, Serbia and Macedonia, so both our partners and terrorism staff, are doing exactly the same projects, but in different setting and in a different place. The project is exactly the same, but then we're gonna see later on during the conversation that due to different political reasons, material reason, the size of the team as well, the conditions are actually quite different between one team and another, but our will, whatever the number of person we have, our will is kind of to have some harmonized approach in both countries. Okay, so that was a little quick presentation of the project. I see nobody else is writing presentations, so maybe we are all done. Thank you very much. So I see we have quite different profiles: psychologists, teachers, knowledge manager, another psychologist, lawyer, that's great, Macedonian, Russian, Serbian, Syrian, that's interesting, that's a great pool of people. So I'm gonna hide the pool for now, up, and I'm gonna start with the definition and different conceptual things. So first, I wanted to highlight something interesting and important. In the proposal, we have called PFA, and emergency counseling. However, there is actually differences between the two, and I wanted to highlight this because they are actually quite important. So the project exactly states that we were aiming to provide children and family protection and support 24 hours a day through recreational activity, emergency counseling, and health promotion activities, just for the child protection part of the project. And the difference between the two is that emergency counseling is actually more oriented to clinical diagnostic of some kind of more important mental health issues than what is actually PFA. The proper definition of PFA is to be a human supportive and practical assistance to fellow human beings who have been recently exposed and who have suffered serious stressors. That is, most of the time, an emergency event. That could be a disaster, or airplane crash, or a war, for instance. The difference between the two, again, is that the PFA can be mostly seen as a methodology for acting with these people. Every kind of frontline workers could actually and should actually ideally be trained in PFA in order to be able to act and to react and to be supportive in the way of receiving the beneficiaries, talking to them, and asking them how can they best help them. It's not something specialized. When emergency counseling is really a different approach, and actually the solution they're going to bring are more related to psychology. Like, for instance, I put you some example of therapies like narrative exposure therapy or trauma-based counseling. They can propose cognitive behavioral therapy, which are all kind of therapies that must be provided by specific and professionalized psychologists or psychiatrists, for instance. And the aim is it's a little different. It's to reduce symptoms of mental health issues. When for PFA, our aim is also to reduce symptoms, but symptoms of more light stress, let's say. Why am I explaining this? Because this difference is important to respect the do no harm principle. The do no harm principle is the idea that all humanitarian workers and frontline workers need to be very careful to not produce more harm to the people we are working with. So we are not, when doing PFA, we are not trying to get the people to enter into a therapy. Actually, most of the people have no proper psychologists, for instance, background. We have not necessarily the opportunity to see the people 4 or 5 times, so we cannot get very deep into a debriefing session. It's very different, and we need to be very careful at not bringing the people too far away and not being able to provide them the correct answer to their stress, basically. Okay, so we have an issue. Okay, so we have the group of 5 people not hearing very well. Okay, Eugenia, I'll let you try to help them. So I've mentioned it. I put here again the definition. PFA is human supportive and practical assistance that involve providing care and support that is non-intrusive, that concretely mean that we don't have to oblige people to talk. there is different way of reacting. There is different coping mechanism as well. People we usually say that people have abnormal reaction to abnormal situation, which is absolutely normal, and some of them find actually relief in having a conversation on them in this situation, but some other don't feel like talking, and that is fine, and we shouldn't push them hard to deal about the issue if they don't feel like. That's why we call it non-intrusive. We try to assess need and concern of the people we are talking with, and help them to address these needs. Usually these needs, we need to first start with the basic ones, so food, water, information, contact with the family, these type of needs. An important part of the PFA is also just to listen people, and the way we listen is absolutely key. That's why we're gonna further talk a little bit more about communication, and be a comforting presence to them, to try to make them feel a little bit calmer and a little bit quieter when sometimes the event itself actually creates a lot of anxiety. Another important component is the information part of the PFA. We're going to see it further as well, but PFA is trying to link people with the different services that does exist and that the people affected may not be aware of. And sometimes this actually has a great impact on how the people feel. Having the information on what is happening, why is that happening, where can I get some help, is actually completely key in relieving stress symptoms. Most of the time what we see on the film is that people don't have enough information. And I'm not even talking about children, who are usually the less informed of everybody. And the last point will be then protecting them for further harm. So these are the three key actions, let's say. It's the 3L, look, listen, link. So that's the 3 steps, let's say, that we should be going through when providing PFA. So first is really looking for the people, like trying to see and seek who is or who might be in need of help. So that could be just watching around, or that could be going towards them and asking them, are you okay? Do you need some help? Do you want, can I help you with something? Sometimes there is obvious signals of stress. People crying, people acting very nervous, people physically isolated from other people, like being on their own, people having nervous breakdowns as well. So there is some external objective symptoms that we can see, and sometimes we don't see them as obvious, but we can enter and approach the people and ask them. So then there is this listen part. The feeling to be listened to is very important. So we feel, so the beneficiary feel, there is somebody who is actually caring for them. So asking them about their needs, about their concern, and trying to be a presence that make them feel calm. And then the third one is really link them to information, link them to people, their family, link them with the services that can help them to address basic needs, but also linking them with their own mechanism and their own way to solve and to cope with their problems. Sometimes when the people are very overwhelmed by the situation, they tend to to lose the connection as well with themselves, and to be unable to find solution they would have found in another situation. So sometimes it's just asking the good question to make them reconnect with what they can do for themselves to cope, and connect them with the people they love, family, friends, social network, etc. So again, I think I mentioned several points already, but what is important to understand strongly is that PFA is not something made for professionals. And when I say professional, I mean psychiatrist, I mean psychologist, I mean psychotherapist, I mean psychiatrist. No, PFA is a methodology to act in a certain way that is very supportive and non-intrusive and caring for the people who have just been going through a stressful event. It's not professional counseling, so it's not really actually emergency counseling, and it's most of all not psychological debriefing. Psychological debriefing means really entering into trauma and stress related to an event, and that really needs a specific academic background to be able to be led correctly, because we can make the people relive again the traumatic event, and that's absolutely not the point. It's not asking somebody to analyze what happened and to relive the event, and it's again not about pressuring people to talk if they don't feel like. So that's the important points. So who are actually our beneficiaries for PFA? Actually, psychological first aid can be offered to everybody, regardless their age, their gender, their social status, their nationalities, their culture. The only point is that obviously you need to approach people differently, and you need to adapt your way of talking and interacting with the person, depending if this person is an adult or a child, obviously, or also taking into account their culture. As I said previously, again, not everyone will need or want to receive PFA, so we don't have to force them. And so, question for you, I wanted to ask: you have different nationalities and different backgrounds. What is, in your opinion, the people who are actually today in your working position, the people who are most in need in your context? So again, there is a little pool that I just opened where you can write down answer. So I'm gonna start with one. So if you have the opportunity to be in touch with people around you that might need PFA, please provide your example in the pool that is out there in the screen. In my case, for instance, I wrote refugee arriving in Switzerland. We don't hear much about them actually, which is kind of interesting. But Switzerland, the same than the other country in Eastern Europe, is actually receiving quite a lot of refugees influx now. And last week, actually, we had 6,000 people, refugees, just in the department where Lausanne is. So, so in the whole Switzerland, there is various departments, and the Vaud is just one of these. And just this little one is receiving 6,000, which is quite an impressive number in terms of the size, actually, of the department. Switzerland is very small. So we have, yeah, exactly, great. We have interesting example here. People with disability, for instance, might be more vulnerable and more in need of PFA, or children themselves. Elderly people as well, unaccompanied minors, exactly. Adolescents, that's true. Adolescents, it's a very complicated period of life, and for them and for the other, actually. And sometimes adolescents feel they are not taken into account enough, they are not listened to enough. So it's an interesting specific target group, indeed. Mother with children can be as well a good target population, because mother usually express high concern about what is going to happen with their children. So spending time and doing PFA with them can be interesting. So I'm letting this. We have more coming in. Exactly. Children under 5 are usually special need group. It's more complicated in emergency situation to find correct place to rest or to lactate, for instance, to breastfeed them. It's maybe more complicated to find adequate milk to give them adequate food. So babies are complicated children to be taken care of during emergency. Indeed, we have an example. Afghanistan can be a country indeed. I mean, between all the refugees arriving, Afghanistan and Syria are usually seen as the two countries sending, let's say, involuntarily refugees due to the very hard context these two countries are in, actually, now. Okay, so I'll keep the pool in case you have more ideas, but I'll just follow. So when can PFA be provided? Actually, it can be provided anytime. That can be days or weeks after the event. It obviously depends on how severe and how long has the event lasted. In that case of migratory crisis, PFA can be useful when the people are arriving to the different location where our programming is. It can be provided when we are delivering them, the hygiene kits or the non-food items. When we have a space and we are playing with the kids, that can be a correct moment as well to have some kind of long, let's say, conversation with the mothers. If we see people showing with withdrawal from assistance, that are isolated, we can try to get in touch with them. We might find and get in touch with people who have been losing a family member, losing in the sense that we can have some death event as well during the migration route, but we can also have people getting lost and getting separated. So that could be a stressful event as well. And we can help them by sharing frustration about where they are, for instance, and where they're going to be doing, and how the logistic is going to be organized between the different buses or the different transportation they are using. Where can PFA be provided? Basically, can be provided anywhere. The only important things to notice is obviously the place has to be safe. The people are not going to be able to talk correctly if they feel unsafe where they are. And secondly, usually it's best to ensure we have some privacy for the people we're going to be talking to. That doesn't mean we need necessarily to talk to them individually. Sometimes we can talk in a little group. For instance, I'm opening a new poll. For instance, for adolescents, we have been talking about them before. Sometimes they feel really ashamed of talking with other, or sometimes the opposite. They feel like they prefer to be talking with their super friends on the side than just alone with you. So we don't need to provide PFA just on a one-by-one relation, but we can sit with a little group or sit with a family as long as the people feel okay to be sharing what they feel and what they think together with other people around. So if you have nice example of where you have been managing to provide PFA, you have again an open pool, and I imagine in your different job position you might have been providing PFA in different spaces. So if you have ideas that you want to share, you can type them into the pool. Child-friendly space, exactly. That's one of the classical space in emergency. So child-friendly spaces or safe spaces are just space where we are providing sport and recreative activities for the children, and where they usually feel more relaxed and they feel secure. So if we have trained staff, it's easy to get in touch with the children, and meanwhile they're playing, for instance, to ask them some questions and see if they feel all right and if they feel like talking a little bit more. Exactly, in front of the bus, whenever they have a place, in that case a room where they are resting and they feel a little bit comfortable and they feel probably calmer, that could be a good moment to sit with them and to have a little conversation if they feel like, and if they don't, just to let them resting. So I let you type your answer if you have good practice to share. Regarding principles, there are 3. Safety, I've just mentioned it. Obviously, we need to avoid putting people at further risk, and we need to make sure that the place we're providing PFA is actually adequate and make the people feel secure. We have to be very careful to respect people's dignity anytime. That means specifically, for instance, respecting their cultural and social norms. For instance, if we talk to a Muslim family, maybe it can be shocking for them if we do it and we touch them, for instance. That could be seen as inappropriate, or the way we dress, comparing to the way they are used to dress in their countries, can be seen as shocking as well. So we need to take a little bit care of these little details. We're going to talk further about this. And obviously we need to respect their rights. Make sure the people can access all kind of services without any kind of discrimination. We can try to make them able to claim for their rights and to access this support. And obviously all this should be done with only one idea in mind, is their best interests. Our interests doesn't have any kind of place now here. So here I wanted to share with you the do and don'ts for using PFA. When we provide PFA, sometimes we can do harm. I was mentioning it before. So for instance, if you have here some example, the typical things we can do spontaneously, which can be actually very harmful, is to make promises or to give information we are not sure about. That could be potentially very harmful because you're creating expectations, and if you're not able to act consequently with the promises you have done, that's really deceiving for the people. If you don't have the information, just mention, look, I'm not sure about this information. I'll try to inform myself and we'll come back to you if I have the correct one, but I have no information on what you're asking me. Another example is obviously not asking people for money, for helping them. Don't force people to talk. Don't be intrusive. Don't be pushy. Usually we advise not to ask people to tell their story. If they do themselves, that's different. But asking precise questions about what happened back in their countries, what are the different traumatic experiences they've been going through, is not a good idea when we don't have the academical background and when we don't have enough time to then respond to the outbreak they can show of trouble or stress. Obviously, respecting confidentiality, don't sharing the person's story with other people. Try to be non-judgmental, which is obviously complicated. It's not an easy thing, but it's really important people feel they can trust the relationship they are starting with you. And in the do side, be always honest, trustworthy, respect their right to make their own decision, not to try to push them into one direction. You can advise, you can connect to services, but then if the people prefer not to use these services, they have the right to make that decision. What is very important is to be very aware of all the services that are around, so you can make sure you provide the correct information anytime. That could be inclusive, like the schedule on the services. That is typically the kind of information hard to find for a refugee, for instance. Oh, okay, you feel like finding the UNICEF people in the field. Well, they are here around between 10 and 5 in the day. Or you can access the police in that place concretely in the morning, between 8 in the morning and noon. This kind of example. Respect privacy. Sometimes something interesting as well is most of the time people, most of the time no, but it can happen that people just refuse help, and that's fine. But then it's helpful to make sure they understand that it's okay if now they don't want. But if they change their mind, it's fine. They can come back and they can still access the services and help in the future if they feel like. It's the same if they don't feel like talking. Like, no, I don't want to talk. Okay, if you feel like talking further, you can come back to me. I'll be available. Just let the door open. That actually very securing. And always behave in an appropriate way, considering culture, age, etc. Yes, we do see your answers. So actually I'm going to come back to where you did provide PFA. In the train station, Okay, in a tent, exactly, it's warm and it's quiet, and they are a little bit more isolated from the other people passing by and stepping by and walking around, so they feel more privacy and intimacy to be softly talking. Places not crowded, indeed. I'm gonna try to make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Exactly, that can be actually anywhere. Sometimes you just have to take some few steps away and you can find a open space, quiet place where you can have a quick chat. Okay, I'm gonna hide this. And to finish the first part of this roundtable, some tips to provide PFA. Something very key is the way we communicate. Body language is very important, and actually we kind of traduce a lot what we think with our body comportments and behavior. So listening, for instance, it's a very important gift that we can give to somebody. And this include actually the way, what we do with our eyes, where we look, the actually gesture we do with our eyes. If we, the best way is to really provide them undivided attention. That means really be focused on the people we are talking with, hearing carefully, and treating them with care and respect. So that includes the type of words we're gonna be choosing as well, that must respect the different kind of culture we are dealing with. Making eye contact, or not necessarily. There is people and culture where you're making eye contact actually is very sensitive. So we need to make sure we are more or less aware of these little cultural differences, so to make sure to not hurt and harm anybody. And the way we talk, the voice we use and the tone we use is very important. If we speak very high and very quick, and if we move a lot, and we're going to produce actually stress and anxiety, and obviously the person we're going to be talking with is not going to feel calmer. So just breathing, showing calm, being focused to the person makes a huge difference. Another exercise of do and don't of communication. Actually, it's kind of small. So I'm gonna start with the don'ts. The things we shouldn't say and we shouldn't do. So again, pressuring, I'm insisting on this, but it's really important. It's a service. They can refuse to use it. Usually we don't advise to interrupt when the people are talking. Let them speak, let them take their time. When the people feel really anxious, it can take longer to get into the discussion, and they can be thinking, they can be crying in between. So just let them have some proper space and proper time to tell whatever they feel like telling us. So do not rush them. There is an example of don't look at your watch. That's a typical body language thing, no? If the people is seeing you watching on your clock, like, well, this is taking a long time and I'm feeling a little bit bored, obviously that's not making you feel very well. Try to don't touch the people if you're not sure it's appropriate. I gave this example a few slides ago. Don't judge them. Don't say, for instance, oh, you shouldn't be feeling that way. It's gonna be okay, actually, you should feel happy to have a ride here. You've had this chance. mean, we can think this could be comforting, but actually, it's not really. Don't make up things you don't really know, so don't make assumptions. Also something we do, and actually I do even with my family all the time, is using very technical words people don't understand. Typically, when I when I talk about work with my family, they usually are like, what are you talking about? Because we have this very specific language in our little word that are obvious for us, but when it comes to people in a complete different job position, for instance, they just don't understand at all. So try to use like normal wording, like simple one that can be understood by everybody, and obviously adapt the language to the age of the person. If it's a child, even more. But even if it's an adult, just simple words, simple sentences, simple phrasing. Don't share somebody else's stories. That's a way to show actually you respect privacy. What the people have been telling you, it's kind of a secret. Keep it for you and don't compare. Like the typical, I've seen somebody and actually her story was something amazing. Like she did that and that and that. Now it's just about you and the person you're providing PFA with to. So again, no false promises, no false reassurance. It's going to be okay. Do not worry. I promise it's going to be okay. Well, actually, we don't really know. We obviously hope, but we don't know. I mean, the migration route is very long and it can happen a lot of stuff, and we never know how the political will of the people are going to change, of the governments, for instance, and they might be very badly received in the next countries. So we don't really know. So try to make sure we don't promise things we don't know. Don't think and act as if you must or can solve all the people problems. Don't take away the person's strength and sense of being able to care for themselves. Oh, that's really important. The best way the person can care about themselves is using their own coping mechanism. And we need to respect and we need to reinforce this. We don't need to take away this from the people. That's very important. Obviously, don't talk about the people in a negative way. Like, for instance, I've met that lady. She was absolutely crazy. She was driving insane about this situation, and it wasn't that bad. That actually traduces what you think about the people, and that can be very harmful. In the do side, things you can say or things you can do. So find a quiet place, we've been talking about. Respect their privacy as well. Usually it's good to find a correct balance between being nearby the person we are talking to, but at the same time keep an appropriate distance. So don't be too close, don't be too touchy, don't be actually intrusive of their personal space, but don't be too far away. Like 2 meters away to have a conversation, a private conversation with somebody. That's not, you don't feel really comfortable. So it's all question of finding a good something in between. Be patient, be calm. Sometimes that can be a challenge for us as well, because we are stressed, we've had not enough sleep last night, the day has been complicated, we have many stuff to do, we need to do our reporting, like this typical daily work obligation, and sometimes it's complicated to show patience and to give time, but actually the best gift you can do is give them time to be with them, like really being with them. So provide factual and correct information. Schedule concrete space. If you know a concrete person with a name that can help, you can share this kind of information. The more concrete and the more precise and the more factual, the better. So giving obviously information in the way that the person can understand. Acknowledge how and what they can feel. So acknowledge the person's strengths I've been mentioning before, trying to make them reconnect with their good positive strengths to cope with their situation and their problems. And allow for silence, even though PFA is usually seen as a conversation. Sometimes silence can be the best communication, actually. So I'm going to open a new poll. The question is, what is your own experience when providing PFA? Oh, I'm not finding the poll. Yeah, okay, oops. My Lord. Okay, so the poll is open. If you have good tips, if you have good, oh, disappeared. If you have good experience to share, wow, I don't find, where is the poll? I've lost it.
I'll do it, don't worry, Marianne. I'm taking care.
Okay, thanks. If you have any example or any good practice or any tips or anything you might feel like sharing with us and with the other people on the webinar, feel free to type it. You have an open poll on your upper right screen, and you can write your experiences. Okay, so now all of you guys are part of the programs TDH is leading on the field, or not really? I don't know if Eugenia, you know about it. I don't know if you've been answering the first question at the beginning of the webinar. Okay.
No, we didn't do it yet, but can we ask people to answer it now?
Okay.
Yes, I can see people doing this. Thank you.
So to come back to your experience, sometimes make a small group and give PFA. That's actually correct. We have this idea again that PFA should be individual, and it's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it's reassuring for them to have somebody around that they know and are familiar with. Obviously, it's easier if the group is more or less the same kind of people, like a small group of adolescents coming from the same country, or a small group of mothers, or a small group of fathers very worried about their families, for instance, or a small group of children. If in the same group you have a mother, a father from another family, an adolescent from another family, and a disabled person, a person with disability, it might be complicated to give PFA to all of them, because each one of them are going to have different needs and different concern. So addressing all the concern and taking the time to talk with them can be very challenging if you're on your own. But if you have a similar profile of people, doing a small group it's interesting. Okay, they are open for conversation and grateful. Yes, actually it's always nice to have somebody, like willing to spend time with you and to listen to you. It's not that easy. So I'm sure they're very grateful for it. So usually at the beginning the people are reluctant to speak, but after a while, when they receive other services items, they are more open to speak. Sometimes that's probably due because there is basic needs more urgent and maybe more important in their eyes. To be accessing before just talking. Obviously, if you haven't had food in 4 days, you don't feel like talking. You want to have food. It's just this. You really feel like having food, and that's it. Or if you're absolutely frozen because it's winter and you have no appropriate clothes, it's never going to be a good moment to sit down and to have a chat. I mean, you feel like feeling warm first, and then if your body is fine and if he's not frozen anymore, then it's going to be fine for having a conversation and sitting down or walking some few steps. So that's kind of normal. I always say something about me. For instance, when talking with parents, I tell them I'm a mother and I have kids. I often show the photo of my children and improve our relationship. Yeah, actually this kind of sharing makes the relationship trustful. Like you're kind of giving something from you and that makes the people feel confident. So that's a very good tip. If you can, obviously, and if you feel like. Exactly, showing real interest. Again, that's a communication thing. I'm with you, I'm listening to you, and I'm really interested in you. Now you are my priority, and that makes people feel very good. We have some questions on paper where they can check how they are feeling, and if they say sad, we start to talk about that. Okay, so you have, if I understand well, you have a paper guidance with question you need to ask them, and do they answer the question on the paper, or do they answer the question like talking and you're writing down the answers? I don't know who. Let me check. Okay. So you have, in this paper, you have different emotional status, like happy, sad, angry, cold, and you can assess the emotional feeling. Okay, that's a good tip as well. So I'm leaving this pool about your experience when providing PFA open. From what I've seen, 14 people have been voting, and you're all part of TDH or TDH partner team, so that's good to know. I'm gonna hide the pool and keep going. So we are now entering the second part of the discussion. That is pretending and hoping actually to really get into your experience and to see if we can harmonize the way we actually do and provide PFA in our program. Okay, I'm gonna reduce this one. Okay, so we can see them. So how can we best fit to PFA principles? That is a list of questions that I'm sharing with you, so we can keep them in mind when we are approaching people. In the three action, like look, listen, link, there is different question that can guide us. How can I recognize people in this specific situation, for instance? Which kind of serious distress signals or sign are they showing, and how can I best approach them? I think I had a chat on this. Let me check. No, but it's complicated to have everything open at the same time. We can be thinking about the way we actually engage conversation. How do we approach? Like, is it physically, or do we shake hands, or do we sign? Do we smile? There is different way of approaching people that are culturally and gender and age appropriate. With children, for instance, maybe it's easier. You can approach them with a toy or with a playing proposition. So that makes probably things easier. Okay, thanks. That's helpful. So you have again a poll open. I mean, this story with the poll is basically because I cannot hear you back. So we could have been just talking and exchanging, but I cannot hear you. I mean, you cannot talk. So I'm actually opening a lot of polls so we can share some kind of information by typing at least. So I had a poll with how do you recognize people with the most urgent need, usually in your daily working day. What are usually the signals you're seeing around that tells you, that person actually might need sometimes? Is the people directly coming to you and requesting some time and space to speak, or are you offering them? Or are you waiting for them in the safe space and are coming straight to it? Or are you walking around the safe space and just watching how is it and where are the people, and is there so yeah, facial expression. So maybe you can see closed faces, sad faces, maybe tears. Yeah, there is more dramatic signals as well. People being injured, shocked, or feeling completely or looking completely exhausted. You can have people crying. You can have people acting lost, like you can tell they're lost because they are watching around and they don't really know where they're going, and they seem to be looking for something or somebody and not finding it or him. These are typical information. Sometimes they stop us for some information, so they might see your visibility. That's something very important. Again, always be around with your visibility t-shirt so they can actually understand you're from an NGO or you're from a service, and they can ask you what they feel like. I'm going to open a little bit more the pool because, okay, the most dangerous if they are in shock and nothing is too visible. Yeah, that's true. Sometimes people internalize a lot the symptoms they feel, and it's very complicated to see them. That's why it's good to do some outreach. It's good to be walking around and asking the people, just asking, hi, may I help you? Do you need something? Sometimes it's just an opportunity to open the door for discussion. And if they say, no thanks, we are fine. Okay, well, if you need something further, just find me there. I'm in that tent. And we have some toys for the kids if they feel like playing. So it's dangerous indeed if they are in shock. The problem is that in that specific situation is, from what I understood, but you can tell me better than myself actually, is that they're just passing by. So you might not have a lot of opportunity as well to see the people for a longer time and see and analyze they are actually in shock. So obviously there is people that are in needs and that probably don't get PFA. But yeah, that's. I mean, we cannot do much about it. It's complicated, but except for doing outreach and really trying to approach them ourselves, being proactive in offering the relationship and the support, I think we cannot do much more than this. So I'm hiding the pool up. Another question I wanted to ask is, do you have a tip to share with your other colleagues regarding how do you make them feel calm and safe? Do you have any tip? For instance, one of you before said, I'm sharing something from me regarding myself. I'm sharing my daughter or my son pictures, photos. That makes them feel actually secure and confident. Do you have tips that makes the people feel calm? Let me open the pool. Here it goes. If you've been having a super nice idea, I think from what I've heard, I think one of the team at some point of the program realized that offering a hot tea was working very well and actually was attracting the people. So offering a hot tea is, I think, a great idea. I don't know if you're still doing it now or if you've stopped. But indeed, I mean, it's frozen, they're arriving in the middle of the night, or it might be dark already. It's cold, they might haven't been drinking for a while. And plus, it's very crucial because they are coming from places where they usually drink a lot of tea. So it's very, very nice to offer them opportunity to grab a hot tea. Any other suggestion or tip? Something you've noticed that makes them feel calm? Indeed. Yeah, actually people have very little information about what they are. They might think they're still in Greece, or they might think they're in Macedonia and they're in Serbia, or yes, so providing information to help them to locate themselves in Eastern Europe somewhere and where they're going to next step, probably, I'm sure, make them feel safe. Simple hello with a smile. Smile is powerful, right? And there is a lot of text around in the internet regarding smiles, and it's they're always saying the same, that it's free to give and it's very rich to receive. And it's so simple, costs nothing, but makes a huge difference. So maybe they haven't been seeing a smile for a long time, we don't know. The people are struggling in the migration route, probably they haven't had so many opportunities to grab smileys around. Show them that you really care, be dedicated, yeah. Give them time, offer them your time and your attention. That is huge. That's a huge gift indeed. So I'm gonna leave the pool open and at the same time open a new one, if I manage it. That one is to share our challenges as well. Have you been facing some specific challenge you feel like talking about? maybe something recurrent, or maybe one single situation that strikes you. It's not easy. I mean, you are not in the simplest position. Being a frontline worker, you're being exposed to these people all the time. They've been passing through a very hard situation most of the time, so it's absolutely not easy. So if you feel like sharing one of your challenges, so we can maybe discuss them, you have an open poll on the screen, and you can share them. So maybe I'm gonna let you sometimes, because I feel like I'm going a little bit quick with many polls and slides and stuff. Okay, yeah, indeed. Sometimes that happen. Mother, maybe they have their babies and their children in their arms or around, and they start crying. Yes, I understand that's complicated. Maybe there is several options. If you're close by to a safe space, you can actually propose the mother and the children and the child to go and have and play in the safe space. Maybe there is other children around, or maybe there is other staff, so the children can play while the mother have an appropriate, or the father actually, have an appropriate space to express and to cry if they feel like. That obviously depends on if the mother and the child feel confident and secure enough to go a little bit away and play. That's not always necessarily the case, but then you can maybe, have a piece of paper and some drawing materials, so you can give them to the child and propose him to draw or to write or to paint, so he is doing something and maybe focusing on something else and not receiving his parents' anxiety. That could be another option. It is very challenging when they ask for something and you don't have it at the moment. Yeah, that's why we need to know anytime, day by day, day after day, we need to know what are the available services around, so we can actually refer them. If you don't have, but somebody else has what the people are asking, and you can provide them this information concretely, practically, and factually. Look, you can go to that tent or that place and ask to that person. That person might have what we need. I have a warning. All name host have less than me. Okay. So that's indeed the challenge. But that's where we need to be simply honest and say, look, I'm very sorry, I don't have what you need. Can I help you to find a place where you can actually have these services? Or I know I have this information and I can share it with you if you feel like. We cannot do everything. What you can do as staff, if you realize some people are asking you a lot of time the same stuff and we don't have it, like typically, I don't know, baby nappies, and we don't have any, then you can report to your manager line, so to ask us to buy it for you so you can have it. That's an option. If you realize, wow, everybody is asking me for warm gloves because they have, they have no gloves and it's very frozen, then maybe we can see if we can buy some. So that's another option. I explain to them that every situation every difficult situation has a solution, so they have to be strong. Yeah, that's an option, but maybe where we need to be careful is by saying to them they have to be strong, can make them actually feel bad if they don't feel strong. So this with this kind of assumption, we need to be careful. If the people feel really helpless, saying them, "Oh, everything has a solution. You need to be strong." Well, if they don't feel strong, it can be very complicated. So I'm hiding. Oops, I've hid all of them. I've seen another one who was talking to them without translation. Yeah, definitely that's a huge complication. And even though we have a translator, it's still a third person in between, like it's not always easy. If it's a male translator and we are talking to a female person, she might not be feeling very safe to be speaking with another man around. Even though it's another female, it's still a three people conversation instead of a two people conversation. So it kind of feel there is somebody in between. You lose time. You lose also quality of translation, because the translation is never exact. So it might be transforming a little bit the emotion. And unfortunately, in that case, I have to admit, I don't see any solution. I think, the best we can do is try to have translators. I know it's not easy. Maybe you can find somebody in the community who speak good English, so who can maybe actually helps you to do the translation with Farsi or with Arabic or whatever. But it's, again, might not be the best ever option, because we don't know the relationship between these two people. So maybe asking somebody to do the translation is even worse than not using translation. That's a very complicated issue. It's way easier when we speak the same language. I'm very conscious, but I have to admit, that's what we have. Basically, sorry to not have a better answer. So regarding culture and abilities, we are not maybe going to get deeper into it, but these are some questions that actually are into the manual of PFA, and this is all the question we need to ask ourselves when addressing and approaching somebody. Do I need to dress in a certain way to show I'm respectful to that person? That could be one cultural question regarding clothing and dressing. Will the impact people, the person I'm going to be talking to, will be that person using clothing items very specific to keep their dignity and customs? That could be religious clothing, for instance, wells to cover the head, these kind of things. Regarding language, how do we usually greet the people in that culture? Again, do we shake hands? Do we say hello far away? Do we smile? Do we nod? I don't know. Do we say namaste in case of the Indian? And obviously, what language do they speak? And is there any way we can have translation for it? So that's a point we already talked about. Should affected women only be approached by women helpers? That's a super important gender topic. In many cultures, women cannot be in touch and in direct contact with male people unless they are their husband. So we need to take this into account, and we need to make sure we have gender balance in our teams so we can cover both gender adequately. If it's a whole family, who is the one I need to approach? Do I first talk to the father, to the man, or do I first talk to the children? Do I first talk to the mother and the ladies? That might differ depending on the culture they are coming from. Around touching people, we mentioned it. Should I touch them or shouldn't I? That depends on the culture again. Is it right to hold somebody's hand or touch their shoulder or their arms? Are there special things I need to consider in terms of behavior? When I speak to the elderly or to the children, to the woman, etc. I see many people are typing things, but I'm not seeing. Okay. So you don't have this kind of. Okay, that's good. I guess that kind of simplifies, but it's just. Yeah, we need to be aware, because that might change depending on where are the people coming from as well. Maybe you haven't encountered this problem to date, but it's important to keep this in mind. So if the situation changed, then we can react correctly. And regarding religion or traditional beliefs, what are the different ethnic and religious groups among the affected people? In your case, there is many different kind of nationalities, people coming from Afghanistan, people coming from Syria, you might have people coming from Eritrea, whatever. So these different groups of nationalities have obviously different beliefs and religion, and be able to be a little bit more or less aware of these differences might help us to behave adequately. So what are the beliefs and practices that are important to these people? And an interesting one is how might they be understanding or explaining what has happened. For instance, I've been working for years in Latin America, and it was very interesting because they had so many natural disasters and landslides, heavy rains, floodings, stuff like this. And usually the spontaneous explanation that were given to these kind of events was actually God will. So until we really understood this, it was very complicated for us to make things change, because most of these disasters were related to risk people weren't really addressing. For instance, they were living just in a mountain where usually landslides were happening. So to make them understand that they could mitigate risks by just maybe moving to a place 10 or 5 kilometers away in order to be secure and in order not to suffer these landslides was very complicated, because they were just letting all this in God's will. They were like, okay, this is happening because God wants it. So they weren't changing anything in their way of caring for the environment, for instance, and they could actually mitigate some of these risks. So understanding their beliefs and the way they explain what happened can be helpful in the way we provide them with information. Okay, and now we are entering the last bit of the roundtable regarding how do we report on PFA. So for this, I'm gonna open a new chat. No, it's not that one. Maybe another one. Chat 4. Here it goes. So I'm very interested to understand how you guys report on PFA. How do you count what is supposedly a session on PFA? How do we understand where PFA starts and when PFA ends? Why am I interested? Because that's a conversation we currently have at global level, and we are trying to find correct indicators to be reporting on PFA, and it's not easy, actually, because we can think, okay, if somebody get into the safe space and say, hey, do you please guys know where I can get food? And you say, yes, sure, 2 tents away there is the World Food Programs. Is that PFA? Or is just sharing information and being nice? So all this question about counting in a quantitative way, what is PFA, is very tricky and it's very complicated. So I was interested in knowing, how do you guys count on the field, or how do you team count on the field if you're a manager? Yeah, if you can share your impression or your experience. You have the chat 4 open. There is no limitation of word in the chat, so you can have more space to write down your answers. What we have seen when Camille has done the reporting is that there is striking difference in numbers between the 2 countries and the different teams. So we are just trying to understand this and see if somehow we can harmonize a little bit this. So first answer. Okay, so for you, criteria for counting discussion as PFA is the kind of topic you share, basically. So if it's something intimate, let's say, feelings, difficulties, coping mechanism, then it would be PFA. My question regarding this first answer is, okay, but what about the information part of the PFA? Because providing PFA is also sharing information and linking the people with the correct services. So I absolutely, I'm agreeing with this, huh? But I'm just challenging, no? I'm just wondering, what about if the person doesn't feel like sharing feelings and difficulties, but they come to you and you have a 15-minute conversation regarding the migration route, regarding the available services, regarding the logistical arrangements of buses, trains, and regarding authorities around to help them with papers. Would that count as PFA or not? Okay, Jelena has written down when I talk about their feelings and needs. Another answer is we have 2 types of recording. First one is gathering statistical data regarding all types of the services provided, and the second one is a template in which specific cases are described. Okay. What do you mean by specific cases exactly? You mean individual cases and the content of the discussion? This is what you meant? So you would have one template for numbers and another one for the content of the discussion. This is what I understand from from the chats. So we report about their psychological and physical health. Do they have trauma experience? PFA is a conversation with some closer and confidential contact. Okay. So I let you some few minutes to type down. If I talk about their needs, health, how they feel at the moment. Okay, so from what I understand, I see that there is a common trend between all you. And it seems to be clear that when we enter into some kind of deeper conversation and closer and intimate contact regarding feelings, difficulties, needs, health, psychological or emotional status, that would be counted as PFA. So I think that's a great first criteria, and it's pretty clear, let's say. But again, I'm asking you the question, and I would be interesting to know what you think. What if the only thing we do is to provide information, concrete and factual information to that people? If they don't feel like talking about psychological stuff or emotions, but they feel like knowing all the details about the logistical arrangements or the services and the different NGO who are around and what they give, and where they can get from some items, etc. Do we count this as PFA? Would you guys count this as a PFA, or wouldn't you? So somebody, Zoran has replied, if I manage to take the person out of its shells and they start to make a normal conversation, I think that my goal is set. Okay? So that's individual case such as a lost child, mother showing sign of traumas, nutrients identified during, okay. Smuggling cases, wow. Okay. And are you guys then taking this, let's say, quality information out of these templates and bringing it back to the team so we can use this information maybe to design a following up of the program somehow? Yes, okay, that's great. That's actually very helpful because the information you guys gather is fundamental for us to realize what is happening on the field And if you, for instance, if you say, oh, there is many cases of, let's say, smuggling cases, and we don't have now the means to respond to this, it's then our job to find or to design another program maybe, and to find an answer and to try to address and respond to these cases. So we have another answer. We write when somebody is okay too, if they say they are fine, but we also talk and they are grateful for the conversation. Okay. Okay, so again, my question is, I see very clear that that you consider a session of PFA when you have some kind of closer and confidential talk, even though these people might have been okay and just like sharing, or even if they have some kind of more specific difficulties and feelings. Am I correct? Is that what you usually report? Okay. Okay, that's very interesting. I will just make the chat a little bit smaller so we can keep it right there in the corner. Okay. Here you see the last, in the little table on the right, you see the indicators the different teams have reported. The total number to date of the session delivered is on one side 339 and another side 21. And I have to say, the objective now is absolutely not to compare situation, because it's not totally comparable. The reason why it's not totally comparable is that because, for instance, the team we have in Serbia is way smaller than the team we have in Macedonia. So obviously they cannot support the same amount of people. Also, another difference is that in Serbia, for political reason, unfortunately, they haven't managed to set a safe space. And you've seen in Macedonia that actually the safe space is a great, let's say, starting point. No, it's a good space to get in touch with the people and to approach them and to engage further conversation. So the fact to not have a space makes a huge difference. Another great difference is that Macedonia has now a 24 hours service. So they have a different team from what I understood, but you correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. From what I understood, there is different team ensuring turnover, so they can cover the whole day and night. So obviously, again, there is more coverage. Then also another interesting fact is that the staff background is different between the two countries. So in Serbia, we have more psychologists within the team than in Macedonia, where there are more social workers. So maybe what we consider as a PFA and as not PFA might differ depending on the academic background we have. And clearly, these kind of different setting have led to a different kind of counting and reporting PFA. So why am I explaining this? Because one of the reasons for this this webinar was to actually try to harmonize the way we count and we report on PFA. So one of the things I would take out of this conversation with you guys is if we can set like a set of criterias on reporting, so to make sure we are on the same line. So now to date on the chats that actually I don't see where the chat is. Eugenia, can you find where is the chat? And the one on how to report.
Okay, give me a second.
Yes, amazing. Thanks a lot. So two of the criteria I see from you is one will be the question of addressing and having a specific conversation regarding difficulties, feelings, psychological or physical health in a closer and confidential manner. A second criteria would be talking about needs and concern. So that would be the second criteria I'm seeing in your chat. Is there any other criteria you see that we can be considering as a way to make sure this is PFA we are addressing? Do you have suggestions? Do you have ideas? Or so we have two to date. Because just to share you a little bit some information at global level, what we are discussing is that actually we need to move in the future towards considering that PFA is really more methodology related to competencies, to staff competencies and to staff skills in their way of behaving and their way of interacting to our beneficiaries, but that we should be moving away from counting PFA as if it was session, because when we actually talk about sessions, the word itself, sessions, recall more a psychological or a psychotherapy session than a PFA. So this line that comes back a little bit to the question of the difference between emergency counseling and PFA, which is not the same. So again, when we talk about session, it kind of look like we do emergency counseling. When actually PFA it's not fully emergency counseling. So we were actually thinking about moving towards indicators of satisfaction. That is, for instance, being more automatically requesting feedback to the people we are dealing with on their satisfaction regarding the service they have been receiving, which makes as well things complicated because we cannot go around and saying to people, hey, do you have 15 minutes for me to answer to 10 questions regarding your satisfaction? So it's not that easy, and that's why the debate is definitely not closed. But that's the idea. It's the idea is to find a way to establish criteria and to tend toward qualitative indicators instead of quantitative. And how can we do qualitative indicators in a correct and easy way, which is not easy precisely. So basically that's the idea. So I'll be hiding this chat because I see nobody else is writing. So I think that was my last, yes. So we are now close to the end of the discussion. We have 7 minutes left, so I'm gonna open a new chat again, and I'd like to have your feedback on this roundtable. Is there, do you find it interesting? Do you have questions left? Is there something unclear? Do you think you need something that I could be helping you with for implementing PFA better? So I can be maybe working on these kind of things. Yeah, so that can be a mailbox chat somehow, and whatever you have, questions, doubts, feedback to give, tips to share, concrete need that I could work on trying to address. If you need, I don't know, templates, guide on reporting PFA, I'm saying whatever. I think Camille must have been sharing with you some pages of PFA I've been doing. It's basically more or less the same information that you had today, but just in a like kind of smaller size and a little bit less descriptive. Yeah, I'm happy to hear your thoughts. Do you think this was useful? Definitely very useful, and it's good from time to time to exchange experience and discuss raised issues from the field, indeed. Yeah, it's a pity sometimes. I mean, in that case, what has been complicated is you have a 6-week duration programming, which is super short, actually, and it's complicated to make the people meet and discuss. So that's a pity. Actually, I cannot hear you because I think it would make things easier, I guess, to have a real proper conversation. But definitely, if you think that was interesting and you feel like having more, just request it, and we'll be happy to set another form of webinar or another form of roundtable. Maybe we could even find a way to have I know there is conference meeting over the phone as well. So maybe it could be easier for you to call a phone number and to hear us better if you have internet issue. Okay, so we have another feedback. The template is sometimes not practical. Maybe we could have some checklist of feeling traumatic experience. Okay, so maybe we can have a look on the template. I'm not sure I have seen the template, so could you please, I'm sharing you my address, my email address. Could you please send me the templates over so I can have a look at it, and I'll try to see if I can transform it into something a little bit more practical. Maybe we should have a checklist on feelings and traumatic experience. Do you mean having something? Do you mean a checklist for you, not to need to be writing down stuff? Or do you mean a checklist of questions you need to ask to the people regarding their feelings? because there are two different things. Okay, so something just to do tick, 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 and so it's easier and you don't have to write down. Okay, definitely, I can do that. I can try to manage something more practical. Yes. Okay, I will do that. Do not forget to send me the template over. Maybe you can copy Camille that you might know, or your direct supervisor as well, so we can keep track of the information. Exactly. Judith is suggesting that we can do, if you find this interesting and you feel that you need more, request it, and we can do a go-to meeting, which is another option to have a two-way communication. So at least I can hear your beautiful voices and not feel so alone. It sounds like I'm crazy. I'm in this Skype box and I'm on my own and talking like for 2 hours and nobody is answering me. So it's kind of funny. Okay, I'm very happy if you found this useful. Anyway, maybe we can start closing the conversation because it's 11 already. I wanted to thank you all. We have 17 participants, but in one of them there is 5 people, so we are over 20 people. So that's very nice to see so many people, so many people were interested in participating today. Thank you very much for attending. You have my email contact, so do not hesitate to drop me an email if you need something, or if you feel like sharing something, or requesting something. We are definitely here to help. You do have line managers as well that you can request things to, but if you feel like you can obviously write to me. And I think this webinar is being recorded somehow, so if you feel like re-listening it, you will be able to find it on the Channel Hub website. Yes, so it will be on the website by the end of the day. Sorry about my English, sometimes it's not that easy. I hope I haven't been too quick. And it was a great pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you very much, Marion. That was very interesting and I believe useful webinar, and you're a great presenter. Really, thank you. We enjoyed a lot. And also thank you very much to the participants for being so active and providing your feedback.